Time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with Florence Villeminot. Hi, Flo.
Hey, Monty.
So the French presidential election is just around the corner, coming up in April. And with the official campaign season in full swing, we're going to look at one particularity of the French electoral system, and that's a candidate's access to mass media.
Well, France has a very egalitarian view when it comes to a candidate's access to TV and radio. The idea is for big and small candidates to have an equal playing field and for voters to have access to a wide range of ideas. You can see the candidates here behind me. The rules, there exist rules on broadcasting balance in many European countries. So how does it work here in France? Well, there's several phases. In the lead up to the official campaign, which begins roughly 5 weeks before the first round of voting, the governing principle is equity. And so the amount of airtime given to a candidate, or a prospective candidate must be said, it depends on a combination of factors. For instance, how well they did in a previous election, how they're polling, how active they are on the campaign trail, how many rallies they're holding, etc. The more dynamic they are, the more airtime they get.
Well, but during the official campaign season or segment there, access to the media is more regulated.
The guiding principle during the official campaign is strict equality. By law, all candidates are given equal airtime on television and radio. And so that means that if an anchor on a public or a private channel interviews a big candidate on prime time, well, they have to interview a smaller candidate on prime time for the exact amount of time, even if that smaller candidate is only polling at about 1%. So it means that smaller candidates get a lot of media exposure as well. Now, the strict time equality goes for when a candidate is talking. It's one of our expressions du jour. This is called the temps de parole. So it's literally the speech time for a candidate. And it also goes for when a candidate is talked about by like an anchor. And this is what they call temps d'antenne, airtime. Now, TV and radio stations have to be extremely precise in this tally, and as you can imagine, it's quite a headache.
C'est beaucoup plus compliqué puisque en fait on est à la seconde près en temps d'antenne et en temps de parole. Du coup, il faudra être extrêmement vigilant.
Now here at France 24, our sister French channel has to follow this very strict tally, while here on the English channel we get a little bit more wiggle room.
Oh, well, good for us. Airwave time and exposure is carefully monitored and enforced by a special state audiovisual watchdog.
That's right. It's called the ARCOM, the Autorité de Régulation de la Communication Audiovisuelle et Numérique. A mouthful, if you will, but it's essentially a state audiovisual watchdog. And one of its missions is to keep track of all this and sanction radio or TV stations that don't follow the rules. And during the campaign, it hires a group of people to literally watch TV and log the seconds that each candidate talks or is talked about.
Là, par exemple, c'était un journaliste qui s'exprimait pour parler de différents candidats, c'est donc du temps journalistique. Tout à l'heure, dans les cas de vérité, j'avais Nathalie Arthaud. Nathalie Arthaud, c'est donc du temps de parole, directement, puisque c'est elle qui parle en son nom en tant que candidate. Si c'était un soutien, d'ailleurs, ce serait également du temps de parole.
Now, things are a little tricky when a president is running for re-election, like Emmanuel Macron. When the president speaks as head of state about French, European, or international matters, well, it doesn't count. But when he's wearing his election campaign cap, then the clock is on.
Okay, so in other countries, Canada, Belgium, they have a lot more leeway. Why is the system in France so particular?
Well, some argue that it has to do with the fact that the French presidency is such a particular institution. The French president is seen as one of the most powerful leaders in the democratic world. They're head of state, head of the army. They have a lot of power over the parliament. And so this exceptional rule calls for exceptional role calls for exceptional rules as well.
L'exception française est très simple. Elle tient au fait que la France est le seul pays européen où l'élection du président de la République au suffrage universel direct ait une telle importance. C'est véritablement le seul cas où le président est à la fois chef de l'État, chef de l'exécutif et, si possible, chef de la majorité. Donc il y a une exception politique avant une exception juridique, institutionnelle et donc une exception médiatique.
So this is a highly egalitarian system. It has its critics. doesn't it?
It certainly does because, this is France, so people complain. Critics say that the system makes the coverage of elections somewhat superficial because, especially when there are a lot of candidates, these smaller candidates can sometimes hog airtime, and so it makes it hard to have a real conversation about the nitty-gritty of real policy. Some people say that important issues get watered down. And another criticism that comes up is that the system is archaic and out of touch with modern politics, so much of which happens online these days. But the members of the state watchdog beg to differ.
Il y a, pour le suivi de la campagne, je pense, une forte attention de la part des citoyens français sur ce qui se passe à la télévision et à la radio. Bien sûr, ils regardent le net, ils s'amusent sur les réseaux sociaux, ils échangent, mais quand il s'agit de faire du sérieux, c'est à la télé et à la radio que ça se passe.
So defenders of the system say that it's actually a guarantee of political pluralism, which is such an important thing in modern democracies. And this strict equality means that voters have a wide access to ideas and candidates, and all this ultimately leads to the rejuvenation of democracy.
Not a simple system, so thanks for sorting it out for us. Okay, to watch this and other episodes of French Connections, just go to our website, france24.com.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith.
All the latest in politics, economics and the arts in Africa on France 24. Our journalists are in every region, every country, to report on the emergence of a continent of unparalleled riches. Bringing you Africa's stories on France 24.
Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.